days, so I'll let you guys know. But I'm very excited for that as well.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Really glad to see the class, 20 people, the girls. Also, I know there's people also at home connected, so makes me feel very good. Yes, let me speak a few words about myself, about my background. I'm adjunct professor at the Center for Health, Wellbeing, and Happiness, and I'm responsible for teaching this seminar, which is known as Nutrition for Optimal Brain Performance. I see some faces here that are familiar to me. And what we try to do is just share scientific information about how we can use nutrition, but also lifestyle to improve different kind of mechanisms, which are linked to general health, okay? I studied many years ago.
Hola, buenas.
Hola.
Me han llamado que no podíais compartir
Sí.
la pantalla aquí.
No sé.
Necesitamos compartir la presentación en Zoom.
Pero la presentación, ¿quién la tiene?
Esta.
Ah, aquí la tenéis. Es esta. Ah, vale, vale. Bueno, pues desde aquí en Share Screen, puedes compartir la presentación solo directamente en la pantalla, que sería la 1, que es esta, y aquí van a ver todo lo que veis en esta pantalla, lo que mejor os venga.
Share.
Sí, la presentación en la pantalla.
Me da igual.
Mejor la presentación ahí.
Y ahí ya estaría compartiendo. Y ahí ahí la ves.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Nada, hasta luego.
I was saying that I studied a master in clinical psychoneuroimmunology, which is health science that studies the connections between the different organs, the different systems that regulate our health and that regulate our adaptation. And what we basically do with the knowledge we have is we learn how to use lifestyle to improve our health. So we work, me and my partners, we work with people suffering chronic diseases, and we help them to improve their lifestyle just as another help to restore their health. So what I want to share with you has this this point of view, the point of view of integrity. Okay, so we're talking about sexual hormones. We cannot isolate sexual hormones from the rest of the body because things don't work like that in the body. Everything is connected. We all give global responses to stress. So adaptation is a global thing. Okay, so I would like to give you this point of view. Have lots of slides, but this is for you. So I would appreciate if you could help me to let me know what you need to know. Okay, so I have a lot of information to share. If it's okay for you, that's good. But if there is something else, just participate. Okay, so feel free to ask as many questions as you have. If I'm capable of answering them, I will. If not, I would say I don't know. It will also happen for sure. And that's it. Okay, good. So when we talk about hormonal health, what I really want to say is about talking about menstrual cycle. I mean, the body produces lots of different hormones. So talking about hormone health, something absolutely big. So course, we're going to talk about how sexual hormones regulate one basic functions for human beings, which is reproduction, fertility. That's a basic program that we have in every single cell of our body. We are programmed to be reproduced, if not as individuals, at least as a species. So we all have or should have the ability of regulating this capacity, this ability. In the case of women, this process, it's much more complex than how things work in men, basically, because a woman is responsible for pregnancy. And that is a big, huge deal for the body. Having during 9 months life inside your body, it's a kind of a stress factor for the body. So that means that just for holding that possibility, we need lots of things to happen. And something that I think it's important to know is that all these hormones that will participate during this cycle, they work as pulses. So it's not like we are constantly producing hormones. It's like we produce every 2 up to 4 hours a pulse of hormone. That is something which is probably an advantage, because producing these hormones is quite expensive in terms of energy, but at the same time, it's also a problem because producing pulses needs rhythmicity. And the way we live today sometimes makes things kind of difficult to maintain this rhythmicity. So losing rhythm, it's probably one of the first risk factors for suffering difficulties here, okay? So when we talk about the menstrual cycle, the goal of this cycle first is to obtain a mature oocyte. That's the first goal. And for that to happen, we need about half of the cycle to be taking place different things. Without a mature oocyte, fertility is not possible. The possibility of reproduction is not possible at all, right? But then there is another part of the cycle where that oocyte could become something different, because there is possibility for you to get pregnant. And if that would happen, your body should react in such a specific way to allow that to happen. So the second part of the cycle, basically, what it does, what it looks like, it's like they prepare lots of changes just in case that that oocyte will become in something else, okay? Of course, all this different kind of hormones that we produce not only regulate the production of an oocyte and all the changes that we'll have to change in a woman's body, but all those hormones also regulate other processes. They also regulate behavior. They also regulate the growth of different tissues. They also regulate immunity. They also regulate metabolism. So most of the times when we suffer problems here, when we lose rhythmicity here, we are going to develop symptoms at different levels. It's not just that we might become less fertile. It can happen, but we will suffer symptoms that has more to do with inflammation, that have more to do with pain, that have more to do with behavioral changes. And that's because estrogens, progesterone, all those hormones, they do lots of things in the body. So when the production of those hormones is not specific enough, the kind of symptoms that we can suffer are very wide, okay? Even though it's not that simple to see this, this slide, what we see here basically is this first part of the cycle, first 3-4 days, 5 days, which is menstruation. So we start to count from the cycle from day 1, menstruation, okay? And menstruation basically is based on the bleeding or just eliminating all the metabolites and substances that have been produced in the uterus, in the endometrium, and also the old oocyte, which is not being fertilized. So we just clean it up by bleeding, okay? But at the same time that this is taking place, a cycle, which is ending, it's beginning. And we know that it begins because of this first hormone, which is the FSH. That hormone is not produced in the ovary. That hormone is produced in the brain. And the brain is the organ that has the control for producing all those hormones. So even though you all know that the ovary is responsible for producing different hormones, it's the brain, the organ responsible for maintaining the rhythmicity and maintaining the control of this function. So everything passes through the brain, and the brain determines when this should start. And when the brain considers that the state of a woman should allow this to happen, what the brain does is producing one hormone. That hormone is known as FSH. That's the beginning. It's the first hormone that we see that exists. What that hormone is going to do is trying to find the ovary, because it's in the ovary where we have accumulated all those follicles that could turn at a certain moment in a mature oocyte. And when you are born, since the day you're born, you already have all the follicles that you will have to maturate during your life, since the first till the end. So by every cycle, what we do is at least get one mature oocyte. This would never take place. Normally, the first cycles are very, very specific, but as long as we grow up, as long as we accumulate different kind of risk factors, we lose sensitivity to sex hormones, and we can maturate more than one oocyte per cycle. But normally, what we look is at least one mature oocyte. So this is like the beginning. And the first part of this period is about getting from one immature oocyte, one mature cell. So this first 2 weeks, what the body is trying to do is just put energy on the ovary, which means basically drive blood circulation to the ovary. So nutrients, oxygen, and all these specific substances that are needed in the ovary to maturate this cell could take place, okay? So that's the first part of the cycle. Once we have a mature oocyte, we have to release it. So the ovary has to release that oocyte, and for that to happen, we need an important change, hormonal change to happen. So we drive from the first part of the cycle to the second part of the cycle. Releasing the cell depends on a different hormone. We need a different hormone to take place. And that hormone is also controlled by the brain. So it's the brain who decides when this has to happen. And what we see is that this first hormone that we are increasing during the first part the period, at a certain moment, it decreases. And if you see here on green, this different hormone, which is very low during the first 2 weeks, the sooner or the closer we get to the ovulation moment, the higher the level of production we have. So at a certain moment, we need one hormone to decrease, another one has to increase. That's rhythmicity. And this hormone makes things possible so we can release that oocyte. And that oocyte will get into the uterus, okay? Through the fallopian trunks, it will end at the uterus. And it could be fertilized at that moment. So the first period, first part is getting the cell. The second part is being capable of getting pregnant, okay? And we are all programmed for that. So this cycle, even though if we would measure in each one of you, we would see small differences, we have all important characteristics in common. And the other organ, which is also very sensitive to all these changes, it's the uterus. It's the inner part of the uterus, which is finally at the end, the organ that would have to sustain a pregnancy, okay? So we see also lots of changes in this other organ. It has to grow first, and then if we are not pregnant, it has to be reduced back again. So all these hormones allow blood circulation to go to these important organs, the ovary, and then the uterus, okay? But even though we usually put attention on this organ, because this organ is responsible for just producing also hormones, and the hormones that the ovary produces are those hormones that are controlled by the brain hormones. So in the first part of the cycle, this hormone, which is produced by the brain, is telling the ovary what it should be producing. And what we see is that the ovary understands perfectly that signal. When the ovary gets this hormone, we produce estrogen, different kind of estrogens. And estrogens are produced in the ovary. And estrogen is the main hormone that allows the oocyte to get matured. Without estrogens, this would not take place. But once again, we produce estrogens, and those estrogens are not only located on the ovary. You produce an important amount of estrogens, and those estrogens are entering into the blood circulation and are just regulating functions everywhere in the body, okay? And then the second part, when we release the ovary, we have an important shift. As you see here, estrogens in blue, they go down, and it appears this other important hormone, which is also produced in the ovary, which is progesterone. And progesterone regulates other functions. So the ovary has no capacity to decide what to produce. It's the brain. So the brain determines what the ovary has to do, okay? So it's not possible to study the ovary to understand how this works without knowing the brain, okay? And the brain has probably the responsibility of giving us the two most important functions for every animal, for every species. The brain is responsible for making us to survive and or allow us to reproduce. And for that, the brain produces different hormones. To survive, we need this hormone, cortisol. For reproducing, we need this sexual hormones. And why I'm putting this? Because these two hormones, cortisol and sex hormones, they are produced from the same basic substance, from the same basic molecule. So something, a risk factor for suffering problems here, it's being under stress situation. Every time we get stressed, the brain reacts as if we had to survive. And when we have to invest energy on surviving, it's not possible to invest energy at the same time on reproducing ourselves. So we can only reproduce ourselves when we don't have to survive. For the brain, feeling stressed is like if we had to survive. Of course, this is not a problem if that feeling of stress is not chronic. But the more chronic we get stressed, probably the more difficult is these hormones to take place, to be produced. Why? Because if we, at a certain moment, we have to use the same kind of molecules to produce cortisol or to produce sex hormones, there is no possible fight in that situation. We will always choose the need to survive. So cortisol will take advantage. So what we see is that the important amount of resources will be at the service to survive. So having control about stress, it's important. And the organ who really decides what stress is the brain. And feeling uncertainty. Stress is about feeling vulnerability. So whenever we feel vulnerable, we activate these pathways. Once again, this is not a problem if that feeling of vulnerability is not long, if it is a short period of time. And when that happens, the brain needs more energy. So it will probably happen that we will suffer some small disturbances here. So this cycle is extremely sensitive to stress, okay? Because when we produce stress, we need cortisol to be adapted. Cortisol is what allows us to put more energy in the brain so we can make decisions. And by decision making, we solve our stress. And if we don't make decisions, it's quite difficult to deal or to solve stress. So now you understand how difficult this is, because sometimes, or most of the times, we don't really know what decisions we have to make to solve the stress. Or some of the times we really know what decisions should be taken, but for different reasons, we won't make it. And if we don't change, we maintain that perception, okay? So stress, important. And something even more important than stress is energy. Because surviving is extremely expensive. And reproducing is extremely expensive. So if we count the calories that consumes maintaining the production of hormones, sexual hormones, it's incredibly high. So everything in the body, it's controlled by energy. So the only organ in the body that really can act as a long-lasting energetic storage is the fat tissue. So the fat, it's as important as stress to understand how this works. Without fat, no fertility is possible. So when you were born and you were babies, in that small body, there is no energy for growing, surviving, and reproducing. It's impossible. So we have to decide where are we going to invest that energy. So what evolution has done is just to stop the investment on reproduction and put the energy on growing and surviving. So the body itself, the brain, decides to invest energy on growing and surviving. And that time that we have to grow is very important, because in that time, what you should do is you should accumulate fat tissue. So this process takes time, a lot of time, and your brain will not activate this cycle until it considers that in your body, it's enough fat. So if you would get pregnant, you could maintain that pregnancy. But pregnancy is extremely expensive. So the brain, your brain won't allow you to get pregnant if it considers that there is no energy storage in your body. So what we should see is that menarche, first period, should not appear until there is enough fat storage in your body. How long does it take? Depends. It depends on how you live. It depends on your lifestyle. When they look, for example, at what time menarche takes place in hunter-gatherer societies, which are a very interesting group of people, because they don't live as we do. They live in a way probably more similar as we as the species have done most of the evolutionary time. They have a very late menarche. So those women need at least 14 years to accumulate enough fat on their body to activate this hormonal cycle. But when we look what happened in Europe, things are completely different. On average, it takes 10 years, 10 and a half years. Why is that? Because we can eat more, and because we can eat different foods, and probably because we're not physically that active. So we can gain weight faster. That means that as far as your brain knows that there is enough fat on your body, it will activate this hormonal cycle. This is not good at all, because when you are 10 years old, your brain is not mature so far. Your brain needs more time to grow, to be connected. So you cannot understand the risk of, for example, having sexual relationships. And what's the meaning of that if your brain is not well connected? Your sexual behavior is not formed so far. So you cannot take, or you cannot understand the risk of having sex at that moment. But your body at that moment can be perfectly capable of sustaining a pregnancy. So what I'm trying to say is that the faster we gain fat, probably the higher the risk is for suffering what's the word for that?
Non-want pregnancies.
Non-want pregnancies. So this should take place slowly. And why is this, or how this happened? This happened because this fat tissue produces this hormone, which is leptin. And leptin is the hormone which is responsible in the brain to activate this cycle. So we need specific fat percentage in our body to produce enough leptin so the brain might know that we have enough fat in our body so we can activate this axis, this hormonal axis. And I said that this cycle needs rhythmicity because it works by pulses. For the rest of your life, this hormone is responsible for controlling the pulses that you will produce to maintain the production of this two hormones, brain hormones, and then the ovary producing estrogens or progesterone. So this rhythmicity that we see here depends on the rhythmicity of your brain that depends on the rhythmicity on your fat tissue. So if you lose weight too fast, or if you lose too much fat, you will lose your ability of maintaining the signal for maintaining the production of these hormones. But what we see is that if you gain too much weight, or if you gain too much fat tissue, you will produce too much leptin. And the more leptin you produce, the less sensitive your brain is. So if your brain is not sensitive, then we'll have problems also on this axis. So it's about having flexible fat tissue. And that fat should be storages around hips and around breast. Because the specific type of fat that produces the right type of leptin is known as ceramide. And ceramide is not visceral fat. Ceramide is a slightly different fat that women accumulate here on your hips and on your breast. So this is important. If you gain weight too fast or too much, or if you lose weight too fast or too much, you can suffer the same problems, which is your brain loses sensitivity to leptin and you lose rhythmicity for producing these hormones, okay? So the fat tissue is important. And if we want to maintain the fat tissue, the way you eat, it's absolutely important. But also the need of fasting, which is that what allow us to maintain the fat tissue flexible. How we gain weight? How do we make our fat tissue to grow? From a nutritional perspective, what do you think?
Is when we consume more calories than are maintaining calorie balance.
Not necessarily. It's about calories. No.
Like honestly, like I always like heard that like from our biology teachers, but like in my own experience having PCOS and insulin resistance, like I would say literally just like eating the wrong food just like fucks up everything, and also stress, like that's the worst.
You see this hormone?
Yeah, I hate that
Insulin.
person.
This is what explains why we gain weight so fast, or why our fat tissue can lose flexibility. Insulin is responsible for driving glucose into the fat tissue. So we don't gain weight about eating fats. No, and fats are caloric. But those calories, if we eat the right type of fats, won't make us gain weight. No, not at all. But if we choose the wrong type of carbs, if we eat normally high glycemic carbs, then we might be creating conditions in the body where insulin has to be constantly produced. And what insulin does is basically driving glucose, removing glucose from the circulation and driving that glucose to the fat tissue. So every time the fat tissue touches up glucose, it creates molecules of triglycerides, and the fat tissue has to store those triglycerides, and triglycerides are big molecules. They're big, so the fat tissue has to grow. And every time the fat tissue grows, it produces a pulse of leptin. So it's not about eating fats, it's about eating the wrong type of carbs. Okay? And the wrong type of carbs, we're going to see. What are those? Okay? Yeah.
But then in the contrary, if you don't want to gain this like fat tissue, then you're not gonna eat semi carbs, or
If you don't want to eat, let's say it in a different way, okay? If you want to maintain your fat tissue flexible, you should eat the right type of carbs, which are low glycemic. So we can classify carbs on two major groups: high glycemic, low glycemic, in terms on how many sugars we find on those carbs per gram. Okay, so we see some carbs that contain more sugars, and that will make that every time we eat them, we increase very fast the glucose level in the blood circulation. And when that happens, glucose is toxic. So we have to respond producing insulin. The more insulin you produce, the less sensitive you become to insulin. So the more insulin you have to produce. And that, from a chronic perspective, that big amount of insulin will make your fat tissue to grow. Okay? So the other group of carbs, low glycemic, they have a less charge or sugar charge. So when you eat them, you are getting sugars. You need more time to digest those sugars. The glucose will increase slower in your blood circulation. You don't need to produce that much amount of insulin. So it's a good way of protecting your fat tissue. Of course, once in a while, it's not a problem to eat. So we should eat both of them. It's just about how often we eat one, we eat the others. Okay. Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. And leptin is the main hormone for maintaining the function of this hormonal excess. So the fat tissue probably is the most important organ for you to improve when you want to improve the function of this axis. So the fat tissue needs to grow and then become smaller. It has to grow and to become smaller. It has to grow and has to become smaller every day. It has to grow, has to become smaller. So when we eat, we make things easier for the fat tissue to grow. When we fast, we make things easier for the fat tissue to be smaller. So it's rhythmicity. So I'm saying that probably maintaining the habit of eating every day 5 times is not a good option for us that live in Europe with lots of different possibilities of foods to eat. Probably a day is more than enough. Okay, good. So is there any relationship between the way we eat and how these hormones work? If we look at the scientific literature, there is that of information pointing out the important relationship that there is between what we eat and fertility. So one of the most important projects for understanding this relationship, which is already taking place, which is a food, lifestyle, and fertility outcome project, at this moment, and they've been studying women for the last 25 years, is saying that something that will create conditions to make these hormones to work better, to be more effective in their function, it's increasing the intake of foods such as fish, legumes, and vegetables, and reducing the consumption of carbs. Now we will see what kind of carbs, okay? And we know that this is linearly related with an increase of red blood cell folate and vitamin B6 in blood and follicular fluid. These are two of the most important micronutrients, folate and B6 vitamin, for maintaining the function of sex hormones. Without folate, without vitamin 6, it's not possible to be or to produce functional sex hormones. And this correlates with an important increase in the chance of pregnancy. So the thing here is that if we're not here at this moment, we need some time to make the adaptation so we can gain this advantage. We can take this advantage, okay? We also know that dietary intake of specific fats are especially important in terms to improve the chance of pregnancy. So we know that omega-3 fatty acids, alpha-linolenic acid, and DHA, which is another omega-3 fatty acids, are probably the most important fats that should be taking part of our dietary fat consumption, okay?
I was gonna ask you if you have any insight about gluten affecting fertility, because my sister, she couldn't get pregnant, but then the doctor, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of also reasons why she got pregnant, but the doctor told her you should decrease your intake of gluten, yes. And I think it helped, she thinks it helped a lot.
Yeah. For pregnancy, the immune system of women evolve to an anti-inflammatory phenotype. Otherwise, it's not possible to become pregnant. Okay, so the immune system can protect us with inflammation or can protect us with no inflammation. So under normal conditions, we should be protected with no inflammatory phenotypes. Gluten, which is a protein that is found in lots of cereals, it's a kind of a complex molecule because we cannot digest it. It's a big molecule. There are very long molecule. To absorb those molecules, we have to break it down in small pieces, and we're not capable. We can break down gluten, but not in really small molecules. So even though we can break it down, the molecules are big enough. So when we accumulate these big molecules in the gut, our immune system can activate itself and can produce pro-inflammatory reactions against it. If you are a gluten intolerant, you might suffer major inflammatory reactions, and you will realize that you have a gluten intolerance because the symptoms that you will develop are very clear. But most of people, it's not gluten intolerance. So there is a lot of people that might be suffering inflammatory responses by gluten consumption, and they don't connect those symptoms with gluten consumption. So there is a relationship, there is data also explaining this connection between gluten consumption and less fertility for specific people. Yeah. Okay. So fats are important. And without fats, no sex hormones. Without fats, no adaptation to stress. So fats are a basic nutrient that should be part of our daily intake of food. Of course, specific fats, okay?
So cholesterol is fat, is
Cholesterol is a fat, yeah.
equal or is a part?
No, actually cholesterol is a molecule, which is it's a fat transporter, but when you look at its molecule, you have the same structure as specific fats. So cholesterol, it's the basic molecule from which can produce sex hormones or the basic substance where we produce cortisol. This is to survive. This is to reproduce. So when we get stressed, we need to maintain the production of cholesterol. That cholesterol will take preferentially this pathway. So we can lose function here. Okay? Yeah. So without cholesterol, I mean, life is not possible. An excess of cholesterol might be a cardiovascular problem, okay? But too less cholesterol is probably more dangerous than high levels of cholesterol, okay?
So you said that with fat, without fat, there's no adaptation to stress.
Yeah.
So I was thinking with midterms coming up, would it also be a good alternative to increase our intake of healthy fats to sort of deal better with the stress?
Yeah, give me 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so no cholesterol means no sex hormones, no cortisol, no life is possible. Okay. So we need this to produce cholesterol. But with these fats, the kind of cholesterol that we produce has less inflammatory risk. So cholesterol, it's a molecule that can have different shapes, can have different structures. And it's not, the name of it is not cholesterol, it's the structure that cholesterol has, what makes cholesterol be better or worse, okay? So what we would like is to have less inflammatory cholesterol, and that depends on fats. So probably these fats should be part of your daily habit. Not all of them, of course. We don't have to eat all of them every single day, but this should be normal foods on your daily basis. So here we have omega-3 fatty acids. We have here also omega-6 fatty acid. We have here also omega-3 fatty acid. We have here alpha-linolenic acid, flax and chia seeds. And I would say, if you could only make one recommendation for improving this sexual hormone, what would it be? I would say, eat this and fast. Eat fats and fast once in a while. Stop eating. Stop producing insulin and stop producing leptin once in a while. That will help your brain to gain sensitivity to leptin. And this will create conditions where you can maintain the production of sex hormones. Okay?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you just repeat what you said by not? Did you say not eating like those or not eating one?
I said fasting, not eating constantly,
Oh, okay.
not making 5 meals every single day. That's like, you know that intermittent fasting is now like mainstream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, for example, someone with insulin resistance, like, when I look at my history, like I used to like forget about like even eating, but when I started to like develop this disgusting thing, like for example, I have a normal meal with that portion like directed by my endocrinologist, and like, literally 1 hour later, I feel as if like I didn't eat, like I just like literally lose my mind. That's why he makes me feel good and etc. So I have like 3 normal meals and like 2 snacks. Like how can a person like that, for example, do fasting, considering like we get hungry super easily?
Probably you need to make more changes. And just by reducing to 3 meals, you're not restoring your insulin sensitivity. So maybe you need more things than reducing up to 3 meals.
Like I would always like eat like 3 meals like my whole life, and like snacks I would never even like have them. But like
Are you taking medication?
no, he
Not
didn't
yet.
prescribe me because I'm like pre-diabetic, not like fully, so he didn't want to give me any medication. So it's just like eating properly, love glycemic foods, and just like having walks,
Mhm.
but still like and losing weight, which I still like didn't improve that much.
Mhm.
So I'm like, what do you think about this, for example?
Maybe I would do things in a different way.
Like what, for example?
fasting and just hold your need for eating is here. You need to restore sensitivity here.
It's
To it.
so hard.
To it, of course, it's not. No, believe me, no. You won't die from a starvation, making 3 meals. What you need probably, I'm talking without knowing your case, okay? So please, listen to what I'm saying. But most of the times, you cannot maintain that fasting period between one meal to the other because you have lost sensitivity here. And by making a snacking, you won't restore the sensitivity here. You need time to restore sensitivity. So probably you need time to maintain those 3 meals. And before snacking, my recommendation would be do some exercise. Become physically active when you feel hungry. And you will see that immediately you start to move, you lose the need of eating. Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a lot of different types of fasting methods. Which one would you like 16 to 8 or?
Yeah.
which one would you recommend?
First step is just avoid the snacking. So 3 meals. That's fasting. And if you want to fast longer, probably the kind of fasting that has more information, more data, 16-8. 16 hours fasting, 8 hours eating.
Okay, and you would recommend that for every day? Like if you can?
No. Not for every day. Because what we want by intermittent fasting is to give you back flexibility, metabolic flexibility, is to give you back metabolic sensitivity. If you always do the same, you will not flexibility. So start doing it twice a week, 3 times a week, not more. And use night hours for increasing your fasting period. So use the night hours, nighttime to fast. So if you want to jump 1 meal, jump dinner.
And for example, what about, because I've heard that, for example, for some people, 16 to 8 could be hard.
Yeah.
But that also doing 12 hours of fasting, so like at night,
Perfect.
would also work.
It works. I mean, fasting works. It doesn't matter if you go an 8 hours fasting, 9 hours fasting, 10 hours fasting. You need adaptation. You cannot go directly for a 16 hours fasting. That's too much if you're not used to fast. So just make a pathway. Increase your fasting period. Yep. Wait. These fats are also important because when we ovulate, we suffer damage in the ovary. And every time we suffer damage, we suffer inflammation. And usually we suffer from inflammatory pain, most of the times around ovulation and before menstruation. So having the possibility of modulate that pain and that inflammation will help us. And the intrinsic mechanisms for regulating inflammation depends, once again, on fats. No specific fats, we cannot produce the kind of substances that will help us to modulate inflammation and to induce analgesia. So without this group of foods, no, please. Someone had a question.
Yeah, just about the fasting, it was like, why is it recommended at night?
Because it's easier for you. Because you are sleeping. So if you sleep 8 hours,
I can't go to bed with you.
yeah, you can.
No, but I tried like for a long time fasting, and for me it was harder.
But if it's not possible for you, then fast during day. But normally it's easier to increase fasting using the night time because we're sleeping. So if you sleep for 7 or 8 hours, you already have 7 or 8 hours of fasting.
Why is it, for example, harder to like, at least for me, to like control my cravings and urges in the afternoon and like, towards the nighttime?
It's your ability to maintain energy here in your brain. What pushes you to binge eating or to eat sugars or to eat salty foods, it's your energetic level in the brain. And for maintaining your energy here, you need to be metabolically flexible. That means that you have to be very sensitive to insulin and to leptin, which are the two main hormones that allow us to maintain the energetic level in the brain. So if you lose sensitivity to these hormones, you will probably suffer from small deficiencies of energy here. And when you get an energy deficiency here, what it works always is go to the fridge and eat. But just by making that decision, the probability that you make a wrong decision very high. When you have to decide what to eat from a relative lack of energy in your brain, you will make wrong decisions. It is measured. It is measured. So there's something that you have to improve, which is your insulin sensitivity, which is responsible for this kind of eating behaviors. You have lost some metabolic flexibility, and it's here. It's your brain. It's how easy it is for your brain to obtain energy.
About fasting, can you do it also not every day of the week and just choose specific days when you do it?
Said do it a couple of days a
Okay.
week or 3 times a week.
Okay,
No, we don't need to make it every single day.
okay.
No, just a brief comment on what she said about how it was difficult for her to fast. And there's this expression in Spanish called el camino del medio, which is like, I don't know how to say it in English, basically that you should always follow el camino del medio, the middle, the way, let's say. And basically, I mean, of course, I'm not a nutritionist, but I guess that with fasting, you have also to take into account that you should also be ingesting calories throughout the period that you're not fasting, right? No? What? No.
No. Is normally when you fast, you end eating more calories than when you don't fast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a normal adaptation.
Mm.
But even though you're eating more calories, does not mean that you're going to gain weight. So it's, just forget this old idea that gaining weight or losing weight has to do with taking more calories from food or wasting more calories from your physical activity. If that would be the true, obesity would be very easy to solve. Because when someone gets obese, just by reducing the calories they take and increasing the calories they waste, they should lose weight. That doesn't happen. So losing or gaining weight is not just about calories. It's much more difficult than that. Yeah.
A question on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite mainstream about like losing weight and not more on gaining weight. I personally had quite difficulties gaining weight. And calories in that sense, they didn't really help. So what would you say could help in that sense? Or like, is there a reason, more formal reason why I'm having this difficulty?
No, I think we are talking too much about weight, and weight is not important. If you see, let me put another example. If you see a sumo fighter, they are obese, right?
Yes.
No cardiovascular risk. They're healthy. They are healthier than regular population. They're fat. So it's not about gaining weight or losing weight. is about maintaining flexibility on your fat tissue. And you can be this big, but you can be flexible.
And if your fat tissue is below average,
Then you will have problems. But that's not normal in our world to be below the fat percentage. It's not normal. People suffering pathologies can suffer from those conditions. But the way we live today, it's not a risk for us. But you can have enough fat, but you can be in a situation where you have lost flexibility. And then things work as if you would not have fat, but you have fat. Okay, so, yeah.
Now, before you go to the next, basically what I'm understanding is that all of us, we have to work in our brain.
Yeah.
So it has to not only focusing what we are eating, also how we are overcoming the stress situations.
Absolutely.
So basically, it's hard, especially in the stage of study or being under the stress of homework, everything.
That's why it's so important to make good decisions about what you eat,
That's it, yes.
because you have to deal with high level of stress.
Man.
So I know.
That's the strength.
Many years ago, I was sitting there, so I know what it is, right? So that's why it's so important to protect all those 2 or 3 mechanisms that you can use to give resistance to your body to deal with the stress. Because for the next years, you have to deal with chronic stress. That's why it's so important what to eat. That's why it's so important what do I do with my emotions. That's why it's so important if I become physically active or not. Because those are the 2 or 3 things that you can use to be in a better shape to deal with something that we know is going to take place, which is chronic stress. So, first part.
Danny, may I ask a question from home here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the amazing talk, and thank you to both clubs that organized this. So here's my question. We know a very sad fact that many students struggle with eating disorders. That is not just in this university, but
Disorders. Oh, excuse me. Yes, yeah.
And particularly women in greater proportion. And I just wanted your thoughts on perhaps the risk, or how they should think about, or how all of us should think about fasting, because I know from personal experience with people close to me that people who sometimes, when we focus too much on what we eat, which of course it's very important to choose wisely, but how that can be perhaps a risk for eating disorders. Like, so I just wanted a word from you about how do you think starting or considering to start a fasting practice, how can it be done in a responsible way? You know,
Yeah, I understand your question, and I understand your point, and you are right. What I should not do is to give like universal recommendations. And please, if I haven't said it, but please don't take this as a universal recommendation. I mean, each one of us has its own background. Each one of us has its own problems. Each one of us has its own needs. And of course, each one of us should be treated individually. But when we look at the kind of explanations that we can obtain from general data, we can say what I'm saying. But I don't know if all of you belong to the group of people that it's been under study suffering problems, regardless this thing. So the fact that I'm saying that fasting, it's a recommendation, does not mean that for each one of you, it's a personal recommendation. Okay, this is important, right? And of course, putting too much attention on what we eat won't help us to develop a flexible behavior. I know that we are talking about nutrition and sex hormones, so we have to talk about what we know. So I know that all these small details are extremely important. And you are right, Gonzalo, and I thank you that you said this, because I didn't state clear these things before I started to talk. Okay, so what can be behind an eating behavior can be lots of things that should be understood before making a personal prescription. But when I say that in Europe, like or in North America, the kind of problems with this hormonal axis have to do with how we eat, I can say as a general belief that we eat too much. And eating too much does not mean that this is going to work better. And I can say that. But please, don't take me or don't take my words to your own personal case, because it might not work. I don't know. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying, Danny.
No, thank you for your comment. Okay, so let's continue, or we won't finish. So menstruation, the first part, okay? So we see an increase on this first hormone, and what we suffer at that moment is an important decrease of progesterone. And if you look here on menstruation, we have increased our body temperature, and on menstruation, we have a decrease. Because when we lose progesterone, the metabolism slows down. So this hormone is also responsible for maintaining our body temperature, right? The big risk in this moment might be iron deficiency. This probably, it's like in this moment of the cycle, the most important thing to have in mind. And the World Health Organization defines anemia as hemoglobin concentration below 12 grams. So it's not about just iron. It's not about knowing what iron you have, the level of your iron. It's about more things, more proteins that depend on iron. Okay, so it's not knowing your iron level. We need to know at least hemoglobin, but when you look at these guidelines, they recommend to measure not only hemoglobin, but other proteins that depend on iron. The thing here is that it's not clear when this becomes a problem. So we don't really know when this menstruation really, where is the limit, right? Because behind an anemia, it can be other factors and not only this process. Okay, when you see the main guidelines, most of them are saying that we have to be aware of this possibility, but they do not recommend to take iron supplements. So it's not a recommendation. When it is safe, it's improving on diet those foods which can offer us a bigger amount of iron. But we know that the absorption of iron in the gut is quite small. So the biggest part of the iron that we have in the body is not coming from food. It's coming from recycling of blood cells. So even though nutrition is not the easiest way of improving iron, it's the safest way of improving or giving control to this possible risk. Menstruating women might have a need of 2.38 milligrams during those 4 or 5 days that menstruation might last. Just by increasing iron foods won't make us for sure that we will meet that need, okay? Because it's not easy to absorb iron. Something that we should have in mind is that some other foods are important to make us easier to absorb iron. So we need at least 2 vitamins that will make us more easy to absorb iron: vitamin C and vitamin A, vitamin Z and vitamin A. So increasing the consumption of fruits and vegetables, it's a good recommendation, because there is where we find these 2 important vitamins. And also reducing during menstruation the intake of tea and coffee will also be a good option. And I would add, reducing cereals would also be a good recommendation, because coffee, tea, and cereals, they have phytates, and they have specific compounds that are known as anti-nutrients that make us more difficult to absorb iron. So it's not just about increasing the natural sources of iron, but also increasing some foods rich in vitamin A and vitamin C, and also reducing, if possible, the consumption of tea and coffee at least. Yeah.
What is your take on having coffee on an empty stomach? Is that something,
know.
like when you're like having caffeine on an empty stomach? Because I know that's also in the nutritional field, a debated thing. A lot of people don't recommend, or do you say that it doesn't? You don't know.
I mean, I don't see it as something
Because
problematic.
they say that it also messes with your cortisol levels. If you drink it on a,
Caffeine can somehow can be altered with cortisol.
because
But I don't find it a big deal. Big
Because,
problem.
for instance, if you have a fasting period of, let's say, after 16 hours, and the first thing you drink is a coffee, then obviously it will also, like, as you said, with cortisol.
Yeah.
Why you don't recommend taking iron supplement? I mean, because of like my medical problems, I've been tested a lot of times, and they have recommended me to take iron supplements, but they have made a emphasis that you can take iron supplements, but if you don't ingest rich vitamin A foods, you won't fix like the iron.
Yeah, for taking an iron supplement, what they say is that you should better need medical prescription. I mean, you have to be sure that you need an extra amount of iron. So what these guidelines are saying is that it's not recommendable in general to take iron supplements by your own. Okay, you need a blood test, and you need to measure specific proteins in your blood circulation so you can take an iron supplement or another way of iron. I mean, iron, you can take it orally, or you can take it on different ways. Okay, that's what guidelines are saying. Okay, so we find iron in shellfish, fish, and meats. Also in legumes are found iron. But the kind of iron that we use is rich in hemp roots, and the vegetal iron is poor in hemp roots. So probably it's a better option for ironing, for meeting the iron need, to go for animal iron. The second part of the period, it's the follicular phase. It's where we are increasing the production of SAH, and the ovary starts to produce estrogen. And the goal of it is just to maturate an oocyte that later on will be released. So normally it goes from day 1 of menstruation until ovulation. And This part is controlled by two hormones, FSH and estrogen. And the main goal is just to maturate an oocyte. This moment, growth processes are taking place. Like your ovary, it's proliferating, your uterus is also proliferating tissue. And for that, we need to stabilize zinc levels. Zinc is a micronutrient that, once again, it's found on the same sources that we find iron, which are the same sources where we find omega-3 fatty acids. So it's like there are specific foods that should be part of our daily food consumption, right? So this is important. And then because of this proliferative growing process that are taking place in the body, antioxidation is also important in this part. And antioxidants are basically found in fruits, especially this group of red, blue, and purple fruits, which are probably the richest fruits in antioxidants. So this is basically protection. Proliferation, most of the times, ends on inflammation. And inflammation means pain, means loss of rhythmicity. So give the body the possibility to be protected against those processes. And the end of the first phase is ovulation, which is the moment where the oocyte is released. And at that moment, we have the highest levels of estrogens. And that's why a lot of women suffer different symptoms this moment, because those estrogens are not just located in the ovary, are getting everywhere. And every tissue has specific receptors for estrogens, the brain, the breast, the gut. So you can suffer lots of a huge wide of different symptoms. And that's because estrogens can regulate functions everywhere, almost everywhere. And those estrogens that are very high, they have to just be inactivated because estrogens are incredibly active. And then when later on, when menstruation will take place, then we will produce, again, estrogens. So the body has to produce estrogens, has to inactivate estrogens, and then to produce estrogens. When we are not capable of inactivating estrogens, we might suffer more symptoms, pain, changes in the way we go to the bathroom. We can feel sad, or we can feel more sensitive, or we can feel pain in our breast, or my back can be painful. Lots of different symptoms. All those symptoms are associated with estrogens. And most of the times, we have deficiency on the ability of inactivating estrogens. And inactivating estrogens, it's a quite complex process that takes place mainly in the liver, where we have to change the structure of those estrogens. We have to transform this hormone in these two different hormones. And for that, the liver has to use lots of different enzymes to change the structure. So having problems here is pretty common. It's pretty normal. So we don't inactivate estrogens, and we suffer from a state where estrogens are too active, okay? For that, for inactivating estrogens, we need methyl groups, because methylation is the main biochemical pathway to inactivate estrogens. Without methyl groups, it's not possible to methylate estrogens, and methyl groups are found in foods. So we need specific type of foods, in this case, vegetables, in this part of the cycle. What kind of vegetables? Those that are known as cruciferous. Broccoli, cauliflowers, cabbage on its different forms. And it's important.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And what is important, if we want to obtain these methyl groups, this has to be cooked. So we should not eat on a raw state. Okay, so please cook it. Cook it a little bit. And cook it. We need to hit it to get all those foods. And the other thing that we need for activation, methylation, it's B6 vitamin. And where is B6 vitamin? Here. Okay, so fish and shellfish should be taken part of our normal eating behavior. Yeah.
If you're vegetarian, how do you get B6? Are you able to
There are
supplement it?
sometimes you might need a supplement. It's one of those vitamins that should be checked because you might have problems, even though
B12, like when
Yeah.
you're vegetarian, B6
I
and
know.
B12.
both of them should be checked because it is possible for you to have deficiencies and you might need a supplementation.
But is there a natural way to get it from food or is it only
The
from-
main sources are this. Legumes can offer also small amounts of
Very
B6.
Yeah, okay.
And in this moment of the cycle, we see an increased activity on this enzyme, which is very active, the ovary, which is responsible to change the next hormone that will appear, which is progesterone, and it's going to change it back to estrogens. So if you are not good in activating estrogens and this enzyme is too active, you can accumulate too much active estrogens. So, and normally this enzyme is very sensitive to insulin. So once again, the same hormone can activate this enzyme. And this enzyme, too active, means basically more amount of estrogens. So it's also interesting to just incorporate foods that give us specific compounds that might have an inhibiting effect on this enzyme. And the most active compounds down-regulating aromatase are bioflavonoids. And bioflavonoids are found in every fruit, but the most important fruits, once again, are this blue, red, and purple fruits, and especially grenade. This is the richest fruit in bioflavonoids. Very interesting. Soya can be also interesting, but soya is giving you also phytoestrogens. So it depends on soya. If you're good by inactivating estrogens and you're sure that estrogens are not a problem, perfect. But if not, it can also be a problem. Yeah. And the last phase is the luteal phase, where the ovary has this luteal corp responsible for producing progesterone. And progesterone, it's important to maintain the conditions in your uterus in case the pregnancy would take place. In this moment, there is a physiological loss of insulin sensitivity in the body. So at this moment, it is important to have some control on these high glycemic carbs, like I'm talking about refined sugars, refined cereals, okay? And it's a difficult moment because when you need or you feel that your appetite is higher, right? So
this could be around 15 days before the period starts.
more or less.
So when we register if we are very good registering our period, then we can have relays when our symptoms start to show.
That's right.
And then decide what kind of food will be better.
So there is also a decrease in serotonin, and that's not helping you to have a good control on your eating behavior. So it could be interesting improving a little bit foods that could help us to maintain serotonin production. Chocolate, dark chocolate. Okay, very interesting.
So we can or cannot?
You can. At that moment, dark chocolate is a good option. It's a good option. Also are good options, almonds. Also, eggs. Also kiwis, fruits, cherries,
I have a question.
turkey, which are serotonin and tryptophan rich foods. Yeah.
What if like you're taking, I mean, I think this will open a new conversation. I don't want to go deeper, but like if you're taking any sort of birth control, I think it can affect your cycle, like it's not gonna be.
Yeah.
So you have to like look for the specific birth control and then see, or
yeah,
what
I
would you
mean,
recommend?
No, I would recommend the same, but things won't work the same. Yeah, but my recommendation would be the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. So what to avoid in general? What are I would say, the most problematic foods with all this that we've been talking? Alcohol consumption, highly processed food rich in added sugars, and highly processed foods and rich hydrogenated fats, which are found here. This kind of foods. So no absolutisms. Okay. Take the general information. I think you have an important group of foods that you can identify as interesting and just try to incorporate those foods during your days. And this is it. So thank you very much. I don't know at home if there is any question.
Milena, Celia, Patricia, Simran.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. That was very informative. I had a question that's kind of subjective, I guess, also like regarding stress. Like, of course, stress is undeniable, unavoidable. But at what point does like regular stress kind of become chronic levels? Is there a time period, or is it intensity of stress, or how does that work?
No, yeah, as you said, it's kind of a subjective state. So when do we chronify stress? It's absolutely impossible to know. And it depends not only on the stress factor, it also depends on your stress axis, on how you programmed those stress axes, those hormonal axes, and how do they respond to those stress conditions. So for some people, chronic stress can take place very, very easily, very early, with 3, 4, 5 weeks. It's enough. For other people that could be more resilient, it can be more time, much more time. So it's absolutely impossible to define objectively when is considered stress something chronic.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What other fatty fish other than salmon are good?
Mackerel, anchovies, sardines, tuna fish. Probably the most important ones. There are more, but I don't know the names. But that's an easy thing to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are we done? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.